Without him, I would not be the instrumental fan I am. This is the show where I talk about the artists I've loved my whole lifetime and how they've shaped the music fan I've become. Welcome to Influencers. I'm TC Kirkham, Kirkham Report. This is my season 2 premiere, and I'm glad you're here because I'm going to talk about somebody special, to me at least. But I'm only going to talk about half of his career, which is a little weird. The reason being, I was very small when I first heard his music. Of course, he was around for a few years before I came along. But my mother loved his music and had a lot of the singles that he did, but never any albums. I never had any albums by the gentleman from that period until recently, the last 2 or 3 years, when I got them either through VCLT or through record clubs or whatever. But I discovered him again. I mean, I always knew who he was, but I really discovered who he was in the late 70s and throughout the 80s. And that's the period I'm going to focus on, the period I'm most familiar with. I have 7 vinyl albums and 1 CD for Magic Box, I think. I want to talk about the period of the 1980s for this gentleman. He had a monster career in the 1960s. Hitting the top 40 on the pop chart regularly, hitting the top 10 on the AC chart regularly. Back then it was called the easy listening chart. And all but one song were instrumentals, of course. And that one song that wasn't an instrumental was his only #1 hit on the Hot 100, and it was his last hit in the top 40 for 11 years. And the song that brought him back was the song that he went to #1 with again 11 years later. Not again, but he went to #1 again for only the second time of his career, and it made him the only artist to have a #1 hit as a vocalist and as an instrumental musician. Who else could it be? This is 1979's Rise from Herb Alpert. This is the album that relaunched Herb's career in the 1980s, and I just picked this up a couple of years ago. I only had the singles originally, but I've had most of Herb's other stuff throughout the years. Herb was a big influence on my life growing up. My mom listened to the Tijuana Brass all the time, and I know some of their singles. I love Tijuana Taxi and Whipped Cream and all those songs that they used on The Dating Game. But I'm not comfortable talking about the albums because I haven't listened to all of them, and I want to focus on these because I know the albums backward and forward. Rise is the first album, and it produced his #1 title track. It spent 2 weeks at #1 on Billboard's Hot 100 in late 1979, thanks to the power of television. It was used in several scenes on the ABC daytime drama General Hospital. Most notably, it is playing in the background when Luke Spencer raped Laura Weber. The song became a monster hit, and Tony Geary became everyone's favorite sexual predator. There are 2 hit singles from this album. Rise, which was the first single, and Rotation, the follow-up, which went to #30. This album, I had not heard the whole thing until a couple years ago, And it's just understandable why it started a renaissance in Herb's career. Terrific music. I've always liked my jazz softer. I like pop jazz. I like jazz fusion. I'm not into the heavy free jazz that so many of the vinyl community is into. But when you give me somebody like Herb Alpert, I could listen to him all day and not have a problem. And Rise is one of those. 1980 was originally written for the 1980 Olympics, I believe, but it wasn't used for it. It was used later for a FIFA World Cup game. Rise, Behind the Rain, Rotation, Street Life, which was the Crusaders hit that year. Love Is, Angelina, and Aranjuez, I believe it is. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Fantastic album. Brought him back to the top of the charts. And it launched his 80s career, and I know quite a bit about that. Herb was a guy who did all styles of music, but he made a discovery in the late mid-70s. He took some time off to realize what made the magic that he made with the Tijuana Brass, and he realized it wasn't the brass, it was him, his mood, his lips, what he could do with that trumpet, and what he does with that trumpet. He is at his best on my favorite Herb Alpert album, and ironically, there wasn't a big hit single from it, despite Rise being a huge hit, although there were a couple of hits on the AC chart and a couple on the jazz radio charts. There's just nothing. He does not do a better album than this. 1980s Beyond. I've shown this before. Sorry, I'm a little scratchy today. Phenomenal album from beginning to end. It includes the original version of Red Hot, which he later recorded again on Fandango or Blow Your Own Horn. I'm not sure which. I got to look at it. But Beyond, the title track, and his cover of That's the Way of the World by Earth, Wind & Fire, mind-blowing. Kamali, the Continental, Reach for the Stars, Interlude for Erica, Red Hot, I like the original better. Beyond, That's the Way of the World, Keep It Going, and The Factory. Produced by Herb, his nephew Randy Badaz, and Andy Armour. This is Herb at his best. There's the full run-up of the musicians and stuff. And this is, still on the old white A&M label. This turned me into a Herb Alpert fan all over again. Now, as I said, I was a fan when I was a kid. This turned me into a super fan. I would buy the next 7 albums after Rise and just loved everything. And Beyond is just the pinnacle. Until recently, and we'll talk about that at the end. 1980s Beyond, best at his best, I think, my own personal opinion. Not that the others are bad, they're not. Not. But Beyond is terrific. Next up is another album. I actually purchased this in a cutout bin about a year later, because it didn't sell very well, and it deserved better than it got, too. This is 1982, I believe this came out. Let me make sure. Nope, 1981. This is Magic Man. And it's a step down from Beyond, but by far it's still fantastic. The title track, Manhattan Melody, I Get It From You, Secret Garden, Besame Mucho, This One's For Me, Fantasy Island, and You Smile, The Psalm Begins. There's a very ethereal quality to the whole album. Not the same kind of fusion and dance beats that are found on Beyond. It is an album all its own. As I said, I did buy it in the cutout bin about a year after it came out. Loved it, and I still love it. This has a rather unusual A&M purplish colored A&M label with the Magic Man etched into the label, which is unusual. Didn't do badly with this. But his biggest selling album of the 80s is by far the album that came closest to sounding like the Tijuana Brass of old, and that is Fandango from 1982. Yes, gotta make sure the years are right. Fandango produced a big hit in Route 101, which was the last top 40 hit he would have as an instrumental artist. He's had several later, which we'll talk about. Fandango has a very Tijuana brass feel to it. Margarita, Push and Pull, California Blues, Quereme Tal Como Soy, Love Me the Way I Am, Route 101, Coco Loco, Aria, Angel, Sugarloaf, and Latin Medley. This was his biggest selling album of the 80s until later on, and it's not completely Tijuana brass because he takes that Tijuana brass sound and melds it with the jazz fusion sound that he is honing in the 80s, and what comes out is absolutely fabulous. I mean, most of his stuff, not everything, but most of his stuff is available for streaming. You can definitely check these out, and some of these will just like, wow, I really love that. I gotta get that box set at some point. Fandango, 1982. My second favorite album is the next one, and I just want to make sure I've got everything in the right order. I do. And it has my favorite single on it, other than Beyond, which I think was released as a single, but it wasn't a big hit. And it was a great album, and I love it because of the dedication too. Blow Your Own Horn from 1983. The beefcake pose there, with the notation there at the bottom, dedicated to my late friend Karen Carpenter. Of course, Herb was responsible for making the Carpenters superstars. This album features the reworked version of Red Hot, which is good, but not as good as what's on Beyond, even though it is a minute longer. True Confessions, Blow Your Own Horn, Gently Suavemente, The Midnight Tango, Garden Party, Paradise Cove, Latin Lady, Oriental Eyes, and Sundown. Brilliant from beginning to end. Although, like I said, I do like the original version of Red Hot from Beyond a little bit better. I like the guitars and the bass in it a little bit better. But Garden Party is my favorite Herb Alpert song. Whenever I think of Garden Party, I think of the Caribbean. I think of sitting back on the beach in Jamaica drinking margaritas and listening to Jimmy Buffett and having that come through a restaurant sound system. Absolutely fabulous album. And despite I'm not really crazy about the cover, Herb. I'm sorry, but this album again, amazing stuff. And again, I believe this is still just the white classic A&M logo there. I would rank Garden Party in my top 3 Herb Alpert songs of all time. I love that songs, and this whole album has that same kind of feel. You can tell how much I played it. Look at the ring wear. Blow Your Own Horn from 1983. 1984 brought the first album in a while. Is it 84 or 85? Let me check the date. I've got the Wikipedia up here so I can make sure of the date. 1984. This album is billed to Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass. This is the first one he's done with the Tijuana Brass name in a while. And again, this goes back to the Tijuana feel that he started on Fandango and continued a little bit on Blow Your Own Horn. Bullish, again, no major hits off this album, but quite a bit of interesting sound to it. Bullish, Always Have a Dream, Make a Wish, Maniac, featuring vocals by his wife, Lanny Hall, Strutting on 5, Love Without Words, Passion Play, and Life Is My Song. This is a great shot of Herb. I love this shot of Herb. The double exposure there. And this is good also. But again, typical A&M logo. It isn't really the brass. They didn't play on this album. And this is again recorded mostly with the Wrecking Crew like the earlier albums were. And it's really fantastic. But it isn't quite similar as you would want it to be to the 60s stuff, but it makes its own way. Fantastic album. The last one I have on vinyl is the album that had his last two big hits on it. This is Wild Romance from 1985. He had two more big hits off of this album. And, oh no, I'm sorry, that's the next album. This is the last album where he's really kind of going nuts on the instrumental stuff. Let me pull that back down here. There's some good stuff here, and it has a great sticker. 8 Ball was the single, and it is a fantastic song. The entire album is terrific. This is the only promo I have of him. I picked this up from Adam at Record Crate, I believe, a couple of years ago. I'd heard the album, but in fact, I had the album on tape from a friend. But this is where he's starting to shift a little bit back from the return to the Tijuana brass sound, more back to his jazzy sound. 8 Ball, Wild Romance, You Are the One, Lady Love, It's All for You, Catch Me, African Flame, can't even read it, Dancing in the Light, and No Time for Time. Really spectacular stuff on here. I'm saying that a lot. It's stupendous. It's tremendous. It's Herb Alpert in the 80s, and that's what it is. People tend to disregard his 80s stuff, and that's not fair. It really isn't. He was a stupendous artist all the way around. Now, the last album from the 80s that I have on CD, so I'm going to have to use Magic Box to pull up Keep Your Eye on Me from 1987. This was a fantastic album that I had the singles from, but the album I only have on CD. Keep Your Eye on Me, Hot Shot, Diamonds, Traffic Jam, Catmandu, Pillow, Our Song, Making Love in the Rain, Rocket to the Moon, and Stranger on the Shore. Diamonds and Making Love in the Rain were both top 40 hits. Janet Jackson and Lisa Keith doing the vocals on those songs. Janet, of course, was signed to A&M. And I love his slower, almost ballad treatment of Mr. Ackerbilk's Stranger on the Shore, which, if you remember the original, which was the #1 song of 1962, I believe it was, won a Grammy for Record of the Year also. Mr. Ackerbilk's version was saxophone, or clarinet, sorry. Herb takes the trumpet and makes it magic on this, and it slows it down into a very ballad-sounding song, and I love that. It is one of Herb's best numbers. Herb did a lot of great covers over the years. This album was co-produced in part by Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. Keep Your Eye on Me, Making Love in the Rain, Diamonds, all the hits. And it showed that Herb had really come full circle. He was now doing modern 80s stuff without any issues at all. And I just found it terrific. The next two albums I do not have, Under a Spanish Moon and My Abstract Heart, so I can't talk about them. But I can talk about 1991's North on South Street, which I have. I think I have a cassette of this. This is another one that is a lot of jazz, R&B tinged stuff, and the title track and one of the other tracks got popular a year or two later because they were featured on Beavis and Butthead, and people started to find them and because they liked the music. And it's a great album. Jump Street, It's the Last Dance, Passion Lady, North on South Street, Paradise 25, Na Na Na, Funky Reggae, Where's Tommy, City Terrace, and I Can't Stop Thinking About You. Herb wrote or co-wrote all but one of the songs, no, all of the songs on the album, which is the first time in a while he'd done that. And it was brilliant. I got to get the CD or the vinyl of it one of these days. It only has a 3 from All Rating or All Music, but it's better than people remember. That's what I have to say. Now, from that point on, I fell out of Herb for the longest time. Not that I wanted to. I'd heard singles from Midnight Wind and a few of the other stuff, and I've listened online to some of the other ones. But for me, these 7 vinyl albums and Keep Your Eye on Me, and to a lesser extent, North on South Street, really make up the bulk of Herb's stuff. Interestingly, yeah, I just noticed that. I'm looking at this. Although they say it is his biggest selling album of the 80s, Fandangos actually it only made it to number 100 on the album chart. So it isn't. Rise and Beyond were bigger, and so was Keep Your Eye on Me. But it's still a great album. He has a flair for making things new again, old things new again. In 2018, Herb went back into the studio. Now, at this point, Herb is in his 80s, and he is still going strong. I mean, the man just doesn't stop. He's 86 or 87 now. He was 83, I think, when this came out. He did a terrific group of albums on Herb Alpert Presents, that's his own label, called Music. There was Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3. Volume 2 is the Christmas Wish, which is the Christmas album he did. And Volume 3 is this masterpiece called Herb Alpert Reimagines the Tijuana Brass. What he did was he took the Tijuana Brass's biggest hits and remixed them, re-recorded them, mixed them in a way that hip-hop and dance artists would love, and it is a real gem. The cover of A Taste of Honey in particular is mind-blowingly good. I love that album. It is just fantastic. Now, over the last few years, Herb has been on a renaissance again. He had the documentary Herb Alpert Is, which, sad to say, I still haven't seen. I need to sit down and watch it because I'm a huge fan. He had this gigantic box set that was released in tandem with the documentary. And he's continued to work both solo and with his wife, Lanny Hall, on projects. He's not showing any signs of slowing down. The man is pushing 90, and he's not showing any signs of slowing down. That is the true hallmark of someone who is truly touched by their muse. He is last I heard, he is still in terrific health, still, willing to go out there and record. He still plays live and around where he and Lonnie live in California. He still does interviews. You can still see new stuff from him on YouTube and on other places that do videos online. Herb is just an amazing performer who has this ability to transcend styles and make them all his own. Whether it's the mariachi sound that he catapulted to U.S. stardom in the 60s with the Tijuana Brass, and later another group called the Baja Marimba Band, also signed to A&M, who were his touring Tijuana Brass. The two acts sold millions of records in the 60s. In the 70s, he slowed down a bit. He had a few minor AC hits, a couple of big AC hits. Jerusalem was the biggest, I think. But it was Between the Skies in Love with You, which was his #1 vocal hit from 1978, and Rise from 1968, and Rise from 1979. It was a very slow period for Herb. He took 4 years off, for one thing, trying to rediscover his sound, and then it took him a while to build back up. Herb is gold. Everything he touches is gold. Now, these albums that I don't have, I have listened to most of the newer ones from about Lonnie Hall, Stepping Out with Lonnie Hall forward on Spotify. I love them. Whether or not I'll actually buy them, I don't know. I wouldn't mind it if they were out on vinyl at a decent price, and I could easily find the CDs if I want them. Herb never fails to put me in a good mood. I will put an album on by him, or even just a song. If I'm needing a boost during the workday and I'm on break, I will pop my headphones on and click on Beyond or on Garden Party or Route 101 or Rise and Rotation, And 5 minutes takes me to get my energy back. I love the way that he does things. I love his style. I love his personality. Herb's personality is visible in every song he does. He makes that work. That's what he went on that self-discovery voyage for in the early 70s. He said that he found exactly what made his music click. And let me see if I can find the quote here. That's for the earlier stuff. Let me see here. He had a crisis in 1969, declaring, "The trumpet is my enemy." He disbanded the brass and stopped performing in public, seeking out teacher Carmine Caruso, who never played a day of trumpet in his life, but he was a great trumpet teacher. And he told the New York Times, "What I found is that the thing in my hands is just a piece of plumbing. The real instrument is me, my emotions, not my lip, not my technique, but feelings I learned to stuff away as a kid who came from a very unvocal household." You can tell when you're listening. That's what makes Herb magic. And the reason Rise came to be was because he tried to do a disco arrangement. He tried to do disco arrangements of the Tijuana Brass, and he hated what he came up with. Hence, we got this album, which is now a classic, and a whole slew of great albums from Herb in the 1980s. If I could pick just one of these albums, this is it, Beyond. But Rise, Fandango, Blow Your Own Horn, equally as good and in their own way. And I mean, the others are great too. Don't get me wrong. When I'm saying that some of them I like better than others, that's the truth. But they're not anything bad. They're just not as outstanding as Beyond is, or Rise, which is a great album. And it's why Herb makes magic in my life. Herb made me an instrumental fan, and I am a huge instrumental fan. Without him, I would not be the instrumental fan I am. It is very influential in what I listen to, and thanks to him and others of that era, Pete Fountain, Boots Randolph, Esquivel to some extent, I became an instrumental fan. I became a lounge fan. And he's the reason why. The early stuff. One of these days, when I feel comfortable with it, I will go back and we will talk about the Tijuana Brass years. Because I love so many of the singles from back then. But for now, let's be content to enjoy Herb stuff from the 80s. Thank you for joining me for my show about where I talk about these artists that influenced me, and I hope you enjoy what you see. If you are a subscriber already, thank you. And if you haven't, please subscribe. And don't forget to leave a comment. I'm always loving to hear what you've got to say. Love to hear what you have to say about the artists that I love. It always makes for great discussion. I'll have another influencer on next week's show. Until then, for the second season premiere of Influencers, I'm T.C. Kirkham, the Kirkham Report. Ciao, baby.